Chapter 761. Ethan didn't dodge. Stepping forward, Brent separated Everly from Ethan. "Please calm down, Miss Hilton. Things have turned out like this, but Mr. Miller never wanted it to happen. It was Mrs. Miller herself who chose this path. Mr. Miller is already sad enough as it is." Everly couldn't hold it in. With tears running down her face, she howled, "You jerk. Liv was already recovering, but you must have provoked her again. Liv is so unlucky to have met you." She stepped around Brent. She was wearing high heels, so she was only half a head shorter than Ethan. She grabbed Ethan's collar with both hands. "What crimes did Liv commit that you had to treat her like that?" Ethan lowered his gaze, saying calmly, "She never did anything wrong. I'm the one at fault." Everly was pissed, but now that things had turned out like this, she couldn't do anything about it. It wouldn't make a difference even if she killed Ethan. Olivia would not be coming back. But she couldn't just hold in her fury. She tried to hit Ethan again. This time, someone grabbed her hand. It was her boss, who was also the man who told her the news and brought her here. "That's enough, Miss Hilton." The man had a stern look on his face. Everly was still fuming, so she refused to let go. "Let go of me, Henry. I'm going to kill this jerk. Liv wouldn't have died if it weren't for him. He was the one who forced her to her death." Everly grabbed the white roses laid at the side, throwing them all on Ethan's body. One of the thorns on the white roses scratched his cheek, leaving a bloody scar on his face. Blood slowly streamed down his face. Ethan never resisted throughout the process. His expression didn't even change. He was in the wrong, so he would take his punishment. He would pretend that Everly was hitting him in Olivia's stead. The floor was in a mess. Henry felt that Everly had vented enough, so he grabbed her waist and carried her away. "Let go of me, jerk. You should know when to stop, Miss Hilton." Henry had a threatening look in his eyes. Everly's voice turned smaller. Ethan bent over and picked up the roses scattered on the floor. His figure was broad and tall, but for some reason, he looked like an old man. Many people were affected by Ethan's sorrow, and their eyes turned red as well. Someone commented, "He must be deeply in love with his wife." A child asked innocently, "But if he loves her so much, how could he bear to hurt her?" An adult hastily covered the child's mouth. "Quit the nonsense." Ethan was nearby, so he heard what they said. He chuckled bitterly. "Yes, Liv, I like you so much, so why did I hurt you? Even children know this truth, but I only understand it now. Is it too late now?" When he placed the roses back in place, he lowered his head in front of the photo. "Don't worry, Liv, I won't have mercy on anyone who ever hurt you." As Ethan spoke, he turned around and swept his gaze across the venue. Everly noticed that the look in his eyes had changed. Just now, he looked like a deflated balloon who lost his will to fight. But now, he looked more like a spirited eagle. His gaze was sharp as if he were looking for his prey. The people who noticed his gaze felt chills running down their spines. A person among the crowd subconsciously took a step backward, but Ethan had already locked onto her. He swiftly stepped forward. Before the woman left, he grabbed her hand in time. There was a look of surprise in Leia's eyes. She had disguised herself very well, so how did he find out? Ethan seemed to have seen through her thoughts. An eerie smile suddenly appeared on his face. "Silly child. We came from the same womb, so how could I forget your gaze? Be good and pay your respects to your sister-in-law." His voice was very gentle, but it sounded terrifying. The others had no idea who the woman was. They watched as Ethan grabbed her hand and then pulled her up to the photo. "Kneel." Of course, Leia refused to do it. Before she could open her mouth to explain, someone kicked her in the calves. In the next second, Ethan pushed the back of her head, forcing her to kneel. With a thud, blood splattered in the air. Chapter 762. Everyone was startled at the loud sound of flesh hitting the tiles. This wasn't paying respects, this was attempted murder. Was Ethan crazy? What had the woman done to him that he would be so cruel toward her? Leia probably never expected this. She was just here to look on, but she was found out in the end. Also, the one who did this to her was her older brother, whom she cared about the most. In her competition with Olivia, she had always been the one Ethan chose. Last time, he even injured Olivia's hand for her sake. So how did things turn out like this? Leia's head was spinning from the impact. The skin on her head was also in a bloody mess. Did Ethan know how hard she had worked just to get her current appearance? You must have gotten the wrong person, Mr. Miller. I've never done anything to you. Why would you treat me like this? Leia lowered her voice on purpose, but she couldn't hide the hoarseness in it. Even if her face could be restored, she couldn't fix her voice, which was damaged by the smoke of the huge fire. But Ethan wasn't in the mood to play with her faked ignorance. Pressing Leia's head, he leaned in and spoke coldly in a small voice that only the two of them could hear. Leia, Liv is gone. I won't have mercy on anyone who has ever hurt her. Kneel in front of her and repent. You have no choice. Leia stopped pretending as well. It was the path she chose. What does it have to do with me? You want to blame someone for it, you should go to the afterlife yourself and blame her. You still won't repent, huh? I don't care if you want to do it or not, you have to kneel either way. With that, Ethan gripped her head and pressed it downward with all his might. Leia didn't even have a chance to struggle. From their movements, Janice could already guess the relationship between them. Her heart ached when she saw Leia being treated like that, but she didn't stop Ethan. It was her fault for owing Leia an apology. But it was only reasonable that Leia pays for what she had done. In the past, Ethan had caused Olivia to despair time and again just to defend Leia. As an outsider, Janice had no right to interfere. It was because she knew that Ethan did this only to repent and vent his emotions. In the end, Ethan would still hold back reasonably for the sake of their relationship. He had just lost the love of his life. If he didn't vent his emotions, he might lose his mind. Leia's head was knocked against the tiles time and again. With every knock, people could hear the sound of bones being rammed against the floor. Ethan's eyes were red as if he had lost his wits. Time and again, he thought that if he hadn't been misguided by Leia at the start, he and Olivia wouldn't have turned out like this. Olivia wouldn't have suffered so much either. Why would an innocent person have to endure all this? Leia's head was knocked against the ground 9 times. But those 9 knocks were done at full force. Leia's forehead turned bloody, and she felt dizzy. Her whole face was pale, and she looked extremely weak. Leia's body was already on the weak side, so she could barely hold on right then and there. Ethan's vicious voice rang out. Kneel here until the funeral is over. The people around them found it weird, but they dared not say anything. People who came over to pay respects had odd looks on their faces when they saw Leia. They looked at the normal-looking woman who had a slender figure. Ethan himself also knelt next to Leia. That was the scene Keith and the Tuckers saw when they arrived. Now, Ethan looked completely different from the image Keith had in his mind. By the looks of it, Olivia's death had affected Ethan more severely than he had imagined. But the things Ethan was going through were nothing compared to the suffering Olivia experienced. So, Keith still had a stern look on his face. He wasn't sympathetic in the slightest. Mr. Miller, I'm here to see Olivia off. Chapter 763. Ethan already had a lead. He was about 70% sure that Olivia was still alive and that he could soon find out where she was right now. His expression remained unaffected as he said, "Thanks." Keith met Ethan's gaze. Ethan's eyes were bloodshot, and he looked like he had lost a lot of weight. Keith could see that for the past few days, every single second had been torture to him. The people who attended the funeral found it weird. Never mind someone bleeding at the funeral, the Miller family didn't even stop Ethan, allowing him to continue kneeling. There was a great meaning behind a man prostrating himself, and it was only reserved for the most reverent of times. But now, Ethan was kneeling to pay respects to his wife. He was even kneeling for a long time, refusing to get up. Time ticked by, and the sky grew dark. Unable to endure it any longer, Leia fainted. Janice hastily went forward. "That's enough, Ethan." Ethan looked at Leia. The blood on her forehead had already clotted, and she looked very weak. For some reason, he kept recalling Olivia's pitiful look after chemotherapy. Leia's current condition paled in comparison. Ethan sneered. The other people around them were still wondering about their relationship. So, Ethan glanced at Brent and said, "Send her to get treatment." Then, he continued kneeling and repenting. He knelt for a whole day. Leia never expected that this was how she would return to the Miller family. She had no idea how long she had been out. But eventually, she woke up. She had just opened her eyes when she heard an anxious voice ringing in her ears. "Are you all right? How are you feeling?" She looked in the direction where the voice came from. It was Janice, who was wearing a black cocktail dress at the moment. Janice had a worried look on her face. "Don't move. The doctor said that you have a concussion, and you need to rest for now. You must be thirsty or hungry after sleeping for so long. What would you like to eat?" Leia looked at the woman in front of her, seemingly a little dazed. The woman in front of her looked exactly like the face that had haunted her dreams. But the only difference was that she had never seen Janice with this expression before. Leia parted her lips, saying in a hoarse voice, "You." Janice's heart ached when she heard Leia's voice. She hastily stood up and said, "You must be thirsty. I'll get some water for you." She had never been a good mother all her life, so this was her first time doing something like this. She was both overwhelmed and nervous, so she looked a little panicky. Before she could reach the kettle, she tripped over a chair and took a great fall. Janice hastily scrambled up. Then, after pouring some water into a cup, she brought it to Leia. "Leia, try drinking some water." Leia only felt that she was dreaming. Was this truly her mother? In the past, Janice had always looked at her with a gloomy expression and asked why she was born into this world. Leia opened her mouth and took a sip of water. Her head still felt heavy. She had no idea if this was reality or just a dream. When Leia finished drinking the water, Janice told Sharon to bring Leia some food. Janice fed Leia patiently and gently. Throughout the whole process, she wasn't annoyed at something Leia had never experienced before in her childhood. "Are you full?" Janice helped Leia wipe her mouth. Leia nodded. "Yes. Don't you hate me?" Just then, someone opened the door. Ethan appeared at the entrance, clothed in black. "Now that you're full, we can begin." Leia looked at Ethan, who looked like the Grim Reaper. His pale face was void of emotion, and it looked cold and stern. Chapter 764. After what happened last time, Leia was filled with fear toward Ethan. She subconsciously trembled. Janice thought that Ethan had vented enough. After all, Leia had been unconscious for a whole day, and the medical team Ethan hired had taken extra care of her during that period. "Kid, Leia has just woken up. You're scaring her like this." Ethan glanced at her calmly. "Mom, did you think that the matter of her hurting Liv would end here?" Janice's expression shifted as well. She warily stood in front of Leia, blocking Ethan's sharp gaze. "Look, her head is already injured. Even if she did something bad to Liv in the past, isn't this enough to make up for it?" Janice liked Olivia, and she pitied their marriage. But Leia was her daughter, after all. The human heart was made of flesh, not stone. If Janice had to choose between her deceased daughter-in-law and her daughter, of course, she would choose her daughter. Sneering, Ethan hobbled up to Leia. He had knelt for so long that his knees were injured. So, his gait was different from usual. "You know very well what she did. She sacrificed countless lives and sowed discord between me and Liv to ruin our marriage. She tried to kill Liv on multiple occasions, and even when Liv was in the advanced stage of cancer, she still maliciously provoked Liv. I'm wondering if she's a human or a demon at this point." Seeing the sorrowful look on the face of her son, who was much taller than her, Janice felt heart soften a little. But both of them were dear to her. What could she do? "Ethan, your sister is at fault, but Liv is already gone. No matter what you do, she won't hear of it anymore. Let the dead rest in peace, and let the living continue to live so that they can atone for their sins, all right?" Ethan wouldn't have any of it. Reaching out, he pulled Janice away. "Mom, I can understand your remorse toward her. But what you owe her and what she owes Liv are two different things. What exactly are you trying to do, Ethan?" Ethan's gaze was cold. "I just want to do unto her all the things she has done to Liv." There was a sharp dagger in his hand. Leia looked at Ethan, stunned. "Are you going to kill me for her sake?" "No." Ethan took her left hand. "Liv once lost a hand. You should return it to her. Leia held her breath. You know that my hands are the most important things to me. Ethan gently caressed her face. Her face was clear of obstructions now, and her original features were exposed. This face was different from his. He had felt elated when he found out that this sister, whom he thought was gone forever, had returned to him. He swore to himself that he would protect his sister well. But in the end, his efforts to protect Leia resulted in him losing the love of his life. Ethan cupped her face gently. Why would you do this? Leia, I was your brother who loved you the most. He was saying the tenderest words, but he was unsheathing the dagger and cutting the tendon on her hand. Leia was in extreme pain, but she didn't make a sound. She simply stared at the blood streaming from her wrist, stunned. Hot liquid dripped on her wrist. It was Ethan's tears. Their gazes met, and Leia saw the pain in his eyes. She felt pain in her body, but he felt pain in his heart. Back then, with two of his most beloved people in front of him, he had chosen Leia. But after Olivia left, he hurt his sister. He was the most shameless person in the world. He was the one who should have died. But he couldn't die just yet. He had to clear all the obstacles for Olivia. Does it hurt? Leia asked him. Chapter 765. Ethan stared at Leia as though she was a beast, wondering why she was quiet and calm. She reached out another hand to caress his face, smiling. Ethan, you're hurting more than I am, aren't you? Why do you have to do this? Liv was such a good person. Why did you have to hurt her? There's no reason. I just hate her to the bones. People said that madness could run in a family. Leia and Ethan were as mad as their mother to some extent. Even up to this point, why are you still not repenting your wrongful deeds? He quickly broke the ligament of her right hand, and blood splattered onto her face. However, Leia smiled so dazzlingly. No matter what you do to me, she'll never come back. Janice didn't expect Ethan to take it this far. He had injured his sister's hand within such a short period. Janice pushed him away with all her might and faced Leia's smiling face. You guys are crazy. Doctor. Call the doctor, hurry. An anxious Janice, who wanted to check on Leia's wound, rolled up the latter's sleeve only to see those scars. It took one single glance to tell that they had been there for many years. Even today, they hadn't vanished. Janice's eyes reddened as she wondered what her daughter had been through. After looking at Leia's bleeding hand, Janice stood up to slap Ethan. She's your sister. What are you doing, you bastard? Ethan had seen those scars too. He had heard that Leia lived a hellish life after being sold to the mountains, hence his pity for her. He kept letting her off again and again. Still, the person who sold Leia to the mountains wasn't Olivia. The person who consigned Leia to misery wasn't Olivia. Thus, what right did Leia have to shift the agony to Olivia? Olivia was innocent. Ethan didn't dodge the slap. He said solemnly, Brent, break her legs. He couldn't bring himself to do it himself. Janice gazed at him with red eyes. Are you insane? What do you expect her to do with her life in the future if she becomes disabled? Ethan sneered at the bloody bed. Liv doesn't even have a future, so how could Leia have one? Olivia suffered from a serious illness at such a young age. Ethan could have found out about it earlier. However, Leia did something behind the scenes and drove the couple apart. So what if Leia was a pitiful person? Did Olivia deserve to make up for it by sacrificing her life? Mom, this is what she owes Olivia. She will never be able to atone for her sins. On top of that, there was blood on Leia's hands. Ethan was showing mercy for going only this far. Janice was determined to protect Leia. You're my children. It was my fault. She is my daughter. Let me take the punishment for her. You can break my legs instead. Surprised, Leia looked at Janice. Leia thought, doesn't she hate me? Why is she saying that? In fact, death didn't bother Leia. She had been through several near-death experiences when she was a child. Thus, death didn't fear her. Janice's reaction was beyond her expectations. Mom, this is between us. If you truly love her, you shouldn't turn a blind eye to her actions. Leia is no longer the little girl we knew. She's one of the core members of Toxic Hive. Everyone wants the members of that organization dead. If she falls into the hands of the army of other countries, she'll end up worse. From now onward, there's no more Begonia. There's only Miss Miller who was lost and found. Leia, I will look after you forever. Don't be afraid. It won't hurt that much. Chapter 766. No, Janice shouted at the top of her lungs. Once a wrong step was taken, the rest of the decisions made would be wrong. The fact that she was blinded by love had turned her family into this. They weren't like a family. Ethan was a man of his word. He really crippled Leia, turning her into a disabled person. Janice stayed by Leia's side as if trying to make up for the ungiven maternal love. Janice didn't mind showering, combing, and feeding Leia, compensating Leia for the lost maternal love. In actuality, Leia didn't ask for much for her future. Life and death didn't make much difference to her. Other than the coincidental warmth from Avery, she was used to humanity's cruelty a long time ago. Now that Janice suddenly treated her this way, she couldn't get used to it. In the past, her mother resented her while her brother gave her warmth. Now, it was the exact opposite. Ethan resented her to the bones while Janice gave her the warmest treatment ever. Janice lived under the same roof as Leia, and she even helped bathe Leia. In the beginning, Leia didn't speak a word. Like a wooden doll, she neither knew pain nor how to smile. It was only 3 days later when she questioned Janice, why? Her sudden question surprised Janice. The emotion soon gave way to happiness. Leia, are you talking to me? Janice's joyful expression confused Leia more. Leia asked, why are you treating me this way? Don't you hate me? It pained Janice to notice the curiosity in Leia's eyes. It was natural for parents to treat their children with care and love. No children would question that. Leia was crippled, but she didn't grumble a word. There was only one answer to that. Leia had been through something more painful than this. That was, Leia neither cried nor caused a ruckus. No one would exclaim how magnificent a stream was when he had seen the sea. Janice hugged Leia and choked on her words. Because I love you. Love. Leia still couldn't believe her ears. Janice gently explained, I'm sorry, it was all my fault. I shouldn't have directed my hatred for Kenneth on you guys. I wasn't completely conscious at that time. She wasn't aware that she had been fed poison, which messed up her consciousness. The things she did, knew no bounds in terms of extreme. Even though she learned the truth after that, it was already too late. She had it coming, and she had given traumatic experiences to her children. I was drugged. It numbed my nerves, and so I was diagnosed with severe mental illness. Whenever the illness kicked in, I would hurt myself and you guys. I managed to recover from it after long years of rest, but I've lost you guys forever. I won't ask for forgiveness. I just wanna look after you for the rest of my life to make up for the harm I've caused. Janice's tears pattered on Leia's neck. I'm so sorry for making you have such a hard time. You, Leia's gaze wavered vehemently. Her voice was shaking. You really love me. Never once had she wished for love in her lifetime. Silly girl. You're my daughter. How can I not love you? Leia began crying. I've waited for this day for many years, Mom. She addressed Janice somewhat shakily because she wasn't used to it. Chapter 767. It was night when Keith secretly arrived in a mansion in the mountains. The lights on the first floor were turned on. Noticing Keith, Irene Tucker welcomed him. No one noticed you, right? No. How's she doing? She pouted her lips, wrapping her arms around his neck in displeasure. Don't you think that you're being too much? You asked your girlfriend to look after your first love. And the first thing you ask about after returning is her. Sorry, Eerie. It's because Olivia's situation is not like any other normal situation. His frantic explanation prompted her to chuckle. The dimples adorning the side of her mouth were adorable. Alright, I was just kidding. Am I that kind of narrow-minded woman? Besides, I can understand you. She has the brain and looks. Even a woman like me finds it easy to fall for her with her looks alone, let alone you. Keith heaved a sigh of relief as he had been worried that Irene would misunderstand the situation. Although he indeed had feelings for Olivia, he had fallen for the adorable Irene 2 years ago. Nonsense. She clasped her hands together as her eyes twinkled. I can finally understand why Mr. Miller did everything in his power to make her stay. Her smile alone is enough to melt my heart. If I were him, I wouldn't want her to run away. She stuck her tongue out. Sorry for the discourse. Anyway, don't worry about it. I like her, and I won't get jealous. She's recovering well these days, unlike her gloomy self when she was in the hospital. Great. Is she asleep? I have something to tell her. I'll call her for you. Irene hopped to Olivia's room. She knocked on the door and only entered the room after hearing a response from inside. Olivia was wearing a white sleeping gown, and her hair was let down. She was reading a medical book. She seemed calm. The way the light shone upon her put Irene into a trance. Olivia looked like a fallen angel. She was the epitome of one's first love. Eerie, what's the matter? Olivia looked at Irene gently. Irene gulped down her saliva. Olivia, Keith is here. He has something to tell you. Olivia felt sorry for troubling Keith. In addition to the fact that he had a girlfriend, she should avoid interacting with him more. What is it that Dr. Rogers wants to tell me? She addressed Keith formally in order to not cross the line. Irene was smart enough to catch on to Olivia's intention. She was trying her best to not trouble the couple by diminishing her sense of presence. Don't be burdened, Olivia. Keith is helping you not only because you're an alumnus. It's also because we hope you can find happiness. As for his feelings for you, he told me about it before we started dating. You don't mind it? Irene kneaded her forehead. How can you be this naive? Nothing happened between the two of you. You're innocent. I'm afraid he never even held your hand before, right? You're such a nice person. It's normal for guys to fall for you. If he dislikes you, I'd doubt his standards. The bright and confident Irene reminded Olivia of her past self. Olivia was only 1 year older than Irene, but she felt old. She figured that she wouldn't be able to smile as brightly as Irene forever. Olivia, what's wrong? Did I say something wrong? Olivia smiled lightly. No, it's fine. Let's head outside together. Irene hummed in response. Although Olivia didn't say anything, it pained Irene to see Olivia's smile for some reason. Chapter 768. Olivia had been resting well these days, so her stats were showing improvement. Keith could tell that her complexion looked better than before. She seemed alive. How does it feel to live here, Olivia? Are you getting used to the environment? He inquired. Yeah, everything's great. Eerie takes care of me meticulously. I'm happy here. Most importantly, she didn't need to live under Ethan's control or worry about assassinations. The majority of illnesses were rooted in bad mental health. Since there was no pressure, she was able to recover quickly. Glad to hear that. Eerie loves helping people out when she can. Just tell her if you need anything. Thank you. I'll be sure to remember this favor. If I'm still around in the future, I'll be sure to repay your favor. Irene said, you don't have to be a stranger with us, Olivia. Come, sit down. Let's have a talk. Olivia slowly sat down. What is it that you want to tell me, Dr. Rogers? Did he find out something? She knew how skeptical Ethan was, so she had been keeping out of contact with the outside world. Considering that her body was not found, she was afraid that Ethan would be able to find out about the truth. Don't be afraid. He didn't catch on to it. He stayed at sea for 3 days, personally diving into the waters, to look for you. In the end, he lost hope and held a funeral for you. Irene coldly snorted. So what if the funeral is a grand one? He didn't appreciate you when sighed. Keith continued, I attended the funeral. Ethan looked worn out and thin. He yanked a woman to the coffin and made her kneel before you. He didn't give her any leeway. He forced her to kneel with him. She fainted after a few hours of kneeling, but he knelt the whole night. Olivia kept quiet. Ethan was a stubborn man. If he had really assumed that she was dead, that was indeed something he would do. After that, I heard from my colleagues that the woman had a miserable end. Not long after she regained consciousness, she was crippled and became a disabled person. What the fuck? He's insane. How could he let his emotions out on others? Irene disapproved of Ethan's actions. She patted Olivia's hand. Thank God, you left. I bet he'll commit domestic violence one day. Olivia, who had a guess that it was Leia, was surprised upon hearing that. After all, Family mattered the most to Ethan. He had never hesitated to choose Leia between the two women. Now that Olivia was dead, he was willing to hurt his sister. But, so what? He gave Olivia the cold treatment and kept disappearing when she needed him the most. When she tried to clear her father's and her name, she wished that Ethan could have sided with her. All she asked for was understanding and support, yet he was blind to see that. He was aware of Leia's deeds and yet he covered for her. Olivia commented indifferently, "She deserves it." Not only that, Ethan deserved it too. Had it not been for the Miller siblings, the Fordhams wouldn't have ended up like this. Leia was merely a disabled person while Jeff had lost his life. This was Ethan's and Leia's karma. Chapter 769. Keith heaved a sigh, relieved by Olivia's current condition. "I thought it would pain you to know his situation and you'd regret your decision. I'm glad that you've gotten over him. Dr. Rogers, the past Olivia has died in that sea. I made this choice myself, and I won't regret it." He suddenly recalled the moment he asked her if she regretted marrying Ethan, and she had calmly answered that she did not. This time, the determination settled in her eyes steadily. She showed pertinence as though she had been given a new lease of life. "Before I finish what I should do, I'll never give up on my life." She had made up her mind. Other than escaping from Ethan, there were so many things Olivia had yet to do. She had to find out who the mastermind was and one more person. After regaining her memories, she thought of the person she met when she was suffering from amnesia, Jack. He had been carrying twins in his arms. The kids looked familiar to her. Most importantly, they weighed the same as newborn babies. She knew that because she had carried one of them. However, Jack carried them horizontally. That was because babies' spines weren't fully developed before they were 3 months old. Thus, there was only one possibility. They were premature babies, hence the smaller poo than their peers. When Olivia was pregnant, Jack had warned her that he was with those people and that he simply wanted to protect himself. After calculating the days, those babies might have been her children. Unfortunately, she had amnesia and didn't hold their promise. She let the chance slip through her fingers. The thought of her babies being alive spurred her to live on. The conversation continued for a while before Keith asked, "Olivia, what's your next plan?" "Keith, I want to go for a second round of chemotherapy." "But your condition," Olivia explained honestly, 2 years ago, I underwent chemotherapy and it went well. I've been taking medicines thereafter. And I haven't suffered from gastric pain for a long time. My condition deteriorated because of the drug given by Ethan. He wanted us to get back together at that time. That's why it rendered the chemotherapy useless. Then, I was able to regain my memories because he gave me the antidote. I think it was that memory loss drug that worsened my condition. Now that it has slowly lost its effect, my body is recovering. This is the time to accept chemotherapy. Although you've recovered a little, the second round of chemotherapy will cause more serious side effects than the previous one. Death doesn't fear me, Dr. Rogers, please. Okay, as long as you're confident about it. There was only one goal in Olivia's head, she had to live at all costs. After 21 days, Keith asked someone to prepare the medicines and medical instruments so that he could perform the treatment tonight. "Olivia, you have to tell me if you feel uncomfortable." "Okay, go ahead." Now, she no longer cared about her body as long as she could live. Unbeknownst to Olivia, there was a figure standing at the top of the mountain opposite the mansion. Resting his hands behind him, Ethan let the breeze ruffle his hair. The moonlight shone expression icy. It is confirmed that Mrs. Miller is right here. Chapter 770. Brent took his phone out. This is what we got from the micro camera. Based on the footage, Olivia was reading a book in the yard quietly. Although the camera was the size of a spider, its recorded footage was of high-resolution quality. Lifting his hand, Ethan caressed Olivia's face on the screen. As he had thought, letting her go was a good decision. She seemed better than before. "We have updates." Keith asked someone to prepare the medicines for chemotherapy. "It seems like Mrs. Miller is going to undergo her second round of chemotherapy." "Got it." Even though Ethan could barely see the lights in the mansion, he was assured at the idea that Olivia was in there. However, they shouldn't alarm the people in the mansion. They could only place the micro camera in the yard and wait for Olivia to come out. We should head back, Mr. Miller. You can't see Mrs. Miller from here either. Now that we know she's still alive, please be rest assured. Recalling how strong Olivia's reaction was against the first round of chemotherapy, Ethan was worried. He wished he could meet her, but he couldn't do anything. I'll stay here for a while longer. He didn't leave and stood at the top of the mountain the whole night. Meanwhile, it was a restless night for Olivia. She had vomited thrice during chemotherapy. Keith kept requesting to stop the treatment because her body couldn't take it. But she knew that only death was waiting for her if she delayed the treatment any longer. Chemotherapy was the only way for her to recover for now. She gritted her teeth, stopping him. Dr. Rogers, I can put up with it. Really, don't give up. Give me a chance. He sighed. Why? I don't wanna die after jumping through hoops just to escape from him. I wanna live. Staying alive was the only way for Olivia to see her children again and bring the mastermind to justice. Uneasiness plagued her the whole night. The last time she felt this way was because of Ethan. Dr. Rogers, are you sure they haven't noticed that I'm still alive? Ethan, that guy, is skeptical. I'm worried. Don't worry, Olivia, he hasn't caught on to anything. He believes it all. If it doesn't put you at ease, I can free up some time to check on his next plan. Okay. The groggy Olivia drifted into sleep. She had a nightmare. Like a demon, Ethan kept telling her that she couldn't run away while following her everywhere. The morning sky was brightening when the final fluid finished. Keith removed the needle for Olivia. You'll be in hellish pain for the following days. She weakly said, I know, Dr. Rogers. As for Ethan, I'll be counting on you with that. Get some good rest. I'll update you first thing if there's anything, he comforted her. Irene ran over and hugged him when there were no watching eyes. Keith, did you miss me? Of course, I did, Eerie. It'll be tough for you these days. Olivia has it rough. Her parents passed away, and she now lost her lover. I hope you can understand her situation. She'll be able to get through this. She pecked him on the cheek. All right, go ahead. I'll get out of your hair. Keith ruffled her hair before heading out to the Miller residence. Ethan looked haggard and pale. In addition to his red eyes, his appearance was scaring Keith. Keith wondered if Ethan had slept. Sorry for disturbing you, Mr. Miller. I previously left some medical tools here. Since Olivia is gone, there won't be any need for them here, so I'd like to take them home. Ethan casually glanced at Keith, whose intention wasn't as simple as taking the things home. Sure, Dr. Rogers. Keith kindly reminded him, we can't bring the dead back to life. Please take care of your health.